Welcome to Bets on the Future, where we highlight the various career paths in the electrifying metals world. From the vehicle you ride in to the bridge holding it up, metals are everywhere. Why not in your career too? I'm Jennifer Betts, a metals industry veteran with almost 20 years experience, here to highlight these incredible career paths as told by the women who are living them. Welcome to today's episode of Bets on the Future. Our guest today is a true trailblazer in the world of metal refining and recycling. Meet Sandy Pierce, the territory manager at the global company BASF, where she is responsible for overseeing the entire Midwest region's catalyst and platinum group metals refining needs. But that's not where the story ends. Sandy is a boundary pusher, constantly venturing beyond her job description into the exciting realms of electric vehicle recycling, rare earth element recycling, electronics recycling, and a host of other innovative projects. Outside of her professional life, she is a dedicated mother, striving to provide the best for her daughter. She's a passionate community contributor, actively involved in various organizations, including the relaunch of the Israel Women Recycling Council in 2018, and she works tirelessly to make a positive impact on her local community. Stay tuned for an inspiring conversation with Sandy Pierce as we delve into her multifaceted journey of professional excellence and community service within the metals industry. This week on Bets on the Future, we have a friend of mine from the industry, Sandy Pierce. She has recently joined BASF, which she can go into detail further about how this publicly traded company is making waves in the metals world. She is a territory manager for BASF, and I am very honored that she is here today with us. So thank you so much, Sandy, for joining us.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for having me here.
I wanted to get a little bit into this, spoiler alert behind the scenes, we're talking a little bit back and forth before we hit the record button. And for those who are unfamiliar with your company, do you mind just sharing a little bit about what you do and what you're a part of at BASF? Because it's a very large company and I would say most people are not familiar with it, correct?
Yeah, I would say so. A lot of times when I go to recycling events and I say I work for BASF now, people are looking at me and say, "Oh, great." And they just give me this really weird smile.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm officially the territory manager for BASF Metals, and I work in their ECMS, which is Environmental Catalyst and Metal Solutions division. What that means is I provide refining services of platinum group metals and also sell precious metal catalysts. Which is when I say catalyst, most people are like, wait, and you still have this stare, right? You're like, what is catalyst? Yep. But catalyst is used literally everywhere in our lives, but it's a niche business, just as metal business that we're in. If you go talk to someone about, say, stainless 304, 316, we will look at each other and be like, oh, yeah, I know those. I know the 409s. Yep. I can see those numbers around, but most people will be looking at us like, you guys are all crazy. We don't know what you're talking about. So what is catalyst? The example of catalyst that I could give is probably most people have heard of catalytic converter, which is used in the emission control system in a vehicle. So what catalyst is doing in our day-to-day life, it's basically a substance that speed up the rate of a chemical reaction. So in the vehicle, you will have harmful fumes like carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, and things like that in your vehicle. So with that catalytic converter in the car, in the emission exhaust system, it basically exchange that harmful gas into something that's less harmful, into more like carbon dioxide, nitrogen, water. So that's an example of like environmental catalyst. But there's also industrial catalyst that is used in petrochemical companies. And typically people use it for processings like cracking and other things like that. The catalyst that I sell will be used in, say, silicone industry. Those puppets that if you have kids, those are made by silicone. And also like phone cases, they are the silicone. So there's catalyst that's used in those silicones. See, like most people will be like, I don't know, cardstock catalyst, ash bead catalyst. But those are the catalysts that's needed to make those products.
I find that so interesting, and I can only imagine from your perspective, being able to see your work now in everyday life, right? Like the poppets that you mentioned, the yeah, we have a few of those in our home as well. It's got to be quite a cool feeling, and also probably really interesting to share with your friends and family what you've been working on.
Very cool. I mean, I think in the metal industry is a very humbling experience. I feel like every day I'm learning something new. I didn't come in here knowing that, oh yeah, silicone, of course, catalyst is this and that. It's more, you learn about it, you read about it, you talk to the right people. Um, it's just a very phenomenal business to be in. And I feel blessed to be in this industry and get surrounded by a lot of people that are great and knowledgeable as well.
So I have to ask, do you have like materials engineering degree? Do you have like a metallurgy degree? Like how do you get into what you're doing today? Was there a school for this? Like how did this happen?
I think there's a school for metal recognition. I think
Not
there
yet.
is, I would say a lot of the people in the BASF company, they do have a chemical degree. They do have engineering, but I have a mathematic background. So none of that is related to chemistry. But I think it's more about my curiosity. So prior to joining the recycling industry, prior to joining BASF, I was working in pharmaceutical industry. I was working in electronic industry. So none of those are metal related. It's more of I'm curious, I'm driven, and I like to get myself in trouble in the innovation space. So I look for different things to do. When I got into a company I used to work for in the recycling space, I still was the same way. Even with that company, and I was trading base metal, your copper, low grade copper, your stainless. I find those base metal interesting. So I learned them, but then what I realized is base metal is a very matured industry.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some very good companies, and they're century companies that have been around for decades,
Mm-hmm.
and people know everybody. So it's exciting, but then I think a lot of it becomes relationship building, and then it becomes transactional. And I like the innovation space. So I started looking into, well, the new stuff, right? So you look at the electric vehicle, you look at the consumer electronics, e-scrap or electronic recycling.
Mm-hmm.
And I got myself into those, and that's how BASF and I connected.
We know each other obviously, but we've never actually lived in the same state, worked for the same company. It's just been through business and organization. So, have you always been in Michigan? Like, has your career, moved you around a little bit?
So far that's no. I guess I've always lived in Michigan since I started working.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my education is from Purdue University, so I was in Indiana for a bit when I came to the States. I initially come to the U.S., so I was not born and raised here. I was born and raised in Taiwan. I moved here really not by my choice. More of my parents said, "Hey, you know what? You need to learn English. So see you later." And I'm here to learn English, so that's how I got here. But I got a math degree, started teaching mathematics actually here at a university in Michigan,
Oh wow.
and
Okay.
then got into the pharmaceutical industry that I was in. It's more of a distribution ship,
Mm-hmm.
and it's more of a dietary supplement industry. So I was importing and materials from China and Japan and other places. So I used to travel to China quite a bit through that industry. In the metals world, though, I would say there's still a lot of opportunity in travel too. There's, this, Jennifer, because you are involved with BIR as well and ISRI, right? So all this organization is global organization and national. So
Mm-hmm.
I do, in terms of territory management here, I do get to travel around states to states, but metals move globally. Most of the metals, some of them, right, go to Asia,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them stays here. So But I know that there's a lot more talk in terms of politics. And that's another area that metals touch that people are probably like, what? I thought this is
Hmm.
just buying and selling. But there's a lot of politics that goes around environmental control. How do I be net zero, right? All those are the buzzwords and new buzzwords that people start talking about, new phrases. What's the ESG? What's sustainability? And
Hmm.
recycling metal space have everything to do with it.
Yes. Yes. It's really interesting how before I got into this, and I got into this because of a career fair in college, I have a finance degree, like shouldn't be here, right? And seeing how metals touches everything and everywhere. So when you start looking around your everyday life, like I'm looking at my windows, I'm looking at my desk, like, the phone, the computer that, we're both talking on, you start to really recognize how important metals is in everyday life. And yet nobody really thinks about it from a career perspective. And so it's really cool to see all the organizations and associations out there trying to kind of pull that together from the just as a quick timeout on all the acronyms we just threw out there. The BIR is the Bureau of International Recycling. They are essentially the international, well, I'd say more so outside the US, international association that really ties together all of the recycled materials industry. And then there's ISRI, which is the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries. And they are headquartered here in DC. They are essentially the standard when we start talking about the commodity specifications for any of the recycled materials that are out there. And they do incredible work. And you start to realize how it gets tied into politics, how it gets tied into, everyday life, the infrastructure, the economy, the environment. I mean, the metals industry, obviously I'm biased, is a pretty great career choice that can combine both your personal and professional passions.
I don't think you're biased. I think it's a pretty great industry too.
Yeah, right. Well, there might be some might be some bias there too. Um, what are you working on at BASF these days? I have noticed that part of your territory management, you're making connections, in a variety of different ways. What's the next thing that you've got on your radar?
So at BASF, kind of as you mentioned, it's a bigger company. So there's different divisions. And I think I am blessed to be in different divisions and participate in some other opportunities here and there. But my primary duty is really to service accounts in my territory. And I offer two services. I refine metals and I also sell some of the metals out. After refine, you have metals that we use to produce another new products. So we sell those precious metal catalysts as well. So those are the two services that's my duty really. So kind of like you said, working with accounts to make sure they're understanding their refining services and then also selling into different various industries for our precious metal catalyst products. But there are several other divisions of BASF that are looking into innovation. So there's a lot of talk about rare earth metal recycling, smelting. What does that look like? And also the battery recycling space too. Battery recycling space is really outside of the ECMS. ECMS is the division I'm under, which is the Environmental Catalyst Metal Solutions. The battery space is outside of that. But because I am a chair for the EV working group for Israel, I am very involved in. It's funny because I just love it so much. I love that innovation space so much, and I didn't want to give it up. So when I joined BASF, I mentioned to them, this is something that I agreed to do for Israel, that I'm the working chair, and I would like to carry this through to make sure that the recycling industry um, gets covered on electric vehicle recycling. And when I say electric vehicle recycling, I'm not just looking at the battery piece. I'm looking at the vehicle as a whole. And I think it's important to look at it as a whole
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much ferrous and non-ferrous and also say plastic and other type of material that is in a car that we don't normally think about. At least right now, when people think about EV, battery is the first thing pop in their head, right?
Yes.
So that's just a space that I really enjoy working on. So I do bring in a lot of our battery team members into some of the conversation that I have. So that's why I said, I feel kind of blessed to be able to touch several different divisions, even though some of them might not directly tie to my day-to-day um, job. I hate to say it's not my job. It's just not a phrase that I don't typically use.
I'm with you on that. I'm much more of the, if there's a problem, how do we solve it? Even if it's not specifically like within my lane, but it's going to affect like my, travel time, right? Or, right? Like, so how do we get the right people in the right room? And I think you're honestly one of the best people to do this because you're very well connected, very knowledgeable, and you understand that you have to get the right people in that room to have the conversations. So it's a very good perspective because you're absolutely right. The term EV, people think battery, when in reality that battery is attached to something called a car or a vehicle, right? And there are a lot. There's issues like lightweighting. So lightweighting, for those unfamiliar, is essentially when you use similar strength materials that are lighter to make the car more efficient, right? So a lot of times when we take a look at vehicles, they switch from steel or ferrous products and they switch it over to non-ferrous aluminum products, for a variety of reasons, including lightweighting, getting better MPG, getting better, miles out of the battery. And your experience coming from a variety of experiences is perfect to help initiate those conversations, to get those people that might only stay in their lane to start talking to, maybe the carpool lane at some point to see if there's some better options.
Thanks.
When you're looking at the next innovations in our industry, is there anything that kind of comes to mind? You obviously work for a very forward-thinking company at this point, and obviously don't disclose what anything proprietary that they're working on, but I envision that you probably have ideas of what could happen down the road, what somebody could be a part of in our industry 5, 10, 15 years from now.
And this is probably more of my personal perspective, if you will. If I look at, and obviously I don't have a crystal ball because if I do, I wouldn't be working for anybody. I'll be a school lunch lady. That's my retired dream job. Just saying.
I love that. I love that.
But if I'm looking ahead, and if you look at the politics and where we are in this world, I guess. A lot of news in China talking about rare earth metals, restricting that, restricting, say, graphite. I think all those are areas of interest for US for the next innovation, right? If you're looking at just in the US, what can I do here? Now, if you want to say if I want to develop myself, say in China or somewhere, then those could still be potential area to get involved in as well. I would think electronic is another good area because if you think about it, we've been driving a computer for a long time. So, and I'm just looking around my desk right now. I have 2 phones here and a computer here, and a couple of chargers there, right? So all those use circuit boards.
Yeah.
So that's another area of metals that I think will attract good attention. And I think steel is not going away. Steel always going to be there, right? Your key elements of metals, like your copper, aluminum, those base metals are always going to stay. So even if you're not thinking of innovative, there are some key base elements that won't go away. So as a company, how do we strengthen that area? So if you don't want to get into anything new, what I would think is, well, what can I make what I have better and different?
The steel reference really hits home for me because obviously the steel industry has been around for quite a while. It's the majority of my background. And yet I see so much potential for the next generation to come in and make adjustments, make improvements, because it hasn't made huge adjustments or changes in the past 10, 20, 30 years, right? I mean, there's been some initiative, especially in the United States, we've been switching more from integrated to EAFs, but I think there's so much more down the road. Possibly creating the Amazon of steel selling, right? Like there's so much more technology that could get applied into our industry, into the metals industry, that there really is a lot of opportunity for the next generation, for folks to see what we've been doing and then put some fresh eyes on it.
Absolutely. I will say though, this is one concern that I have for some of the next generations is that I consider myself not so old school, but sometimes I could be. But if you really look at the next generation, I'm thinking my daughter too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she will sit there, look at a video, and now if it circles once or twice, all three times she's going somewhere else.
Yes.
Right. So I think sometimes patience is a virtue. And I'm saying that not because I have it. This is one of those do as I say, not as I do. It's I think patience is a key, right? I think knowing that okay, you can make a difference, making a change. Just as DEI initiatives. People talk about it, companies talk about it. And I think some people will stay, make those initial steps of changes, and then they don't see it happen right away and they get discouraged and they leave.
Yes.
And I think there is something to say about staying and trying to make things work. But at the same time, it's also knowing yourself well enough. So that way, you're seeing what you really want. What can you exchange? What can you wait? Right. I think it's important to know that. I think you and I kind of talked a little bit about, my mindset a little bit. A lot of times I want my yes to be yes, my no to be no.
Mm-hmm.
So really intentionally knowing what is life giving for me, what is not, and knowing some of those things is important. And I think sometimes in our generations, my daughter's generation, for example, I think sometimes they don't slow down enough to really answer those questions. Do I really want this? Do I not want this? And right. I think sometimes that's the key, to be able to know what you stand for, what you want, and then choose to wait. So
yes, I've been there. I've definitely tested my own patience of, do I want to stay in a situation, right? Do I, because the change wasn't immediate. I mean, it's a big reason of why we're doing this podcast currently, right? There is about 30% of the manufacturing industry are females. By 2030, the Women in Manufacturing Association says that it will probably be 35% will be females, when the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the U.S. government Bureau of Labor Statistics, says that there are 57% of the labor force are females. So we have quite a ways to go when it comes to attracting more females to our industry. And I do appreciate companies that are posting their DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion, publicly putting it out there. It will take some time for some of those efforts to take hold, right? It doesn't just change overnight. But I think having incredible women like yourself in positions of leadership, of showcasing what you're doing online. If you're listening, please give Sandy a follow on LinkedIn, connect with her on there. She's an incredible resource. She posts really knowledgeable articles and thought pieces on there. And so having great examples like yourself, I think, will encourage the next generation to have a little bit more patience, to see that, okay, we're sticking around, we're enjoying what we're doing. Maybe I would like that career as well.
Thank you. I should give a plug and shout out for Women in Recycling at Israel as well, right? So that's just a council that we put together, and I'm currently chairing that, just to bring more women in the recycling industry and highlighting what are some benefits and mentoring our next generation. And the Women in Recycling is not just for women. I'd like to say that, men are welcome for a lot of those, because truth to be told, just like you said, only 30-some% are women. So we do need a lot of allies, people that believe that this is important and help us to get there. I recently had a mentoring meeting I went to my mentor and we kind of talk about this. And she made a comment that I remember. And this is something that I'm currently working on because she made the comment. And she said a lot of times women in our, not just in our industry, she and I are kind of in a different industry. She's in more of a manufacturing industry. Not that manufacturing is different than recycling, but she's in a different type of manufacturing, if you will.
Mhm.
Anyway, so she made a comment about how when she was in the industry and she was looking for mentorship, and what she realizes once you get to a certain point in your career, it becomes like you're good. And then
Mhm.
but there is an underlying, but not good enough for the next role.
Mm.
And no one will be able to tell you why. What is that? So she made
Mhm.
a comment of it's so important to find someone in your career that will level with you, that will provide basically a candid conversation and help you move forward. And I think that's very important. And I'm looking for those people in my life to level with me, to help pushing me to be better each and every day. And I am so glad that I have friends like Jennifer and many others in our recycling industry. And I think, people, once they get in the metal industry, they'll realize there's a lot of good people. There's a lot of bad people too, but there's a lot of good people.
Yes. Yes. A lot more good people, I would say. We always get, every industry has a few bad apples, fine, whatever. But generally speaking, we're a pretty great group of people. Your comments earlier reminded me, I was in Houston earlier last week for the AWMI Texas industry dinner. AWMI is the Association of Women in the Metals Industry. And your comment about how women in recycling, AWMI, women in manufacturing, all of these associations, they're open to both males and females. And we do need men as allies to help support. And I thought it was very interesting because out of the room that we were in last week, there were several men. There was a good percentage of men that were in the room. And I had an opportunity to speak with several of them afterwards. And one of them made the comment, he's there for his daughters. And he's probably around our age, to be honest. So like he has daughters that are around our kids' age. So elementary school age. And so he said that he's here for his daughters to help create a culture within the industry that his daughters would be comfortable in, that he would feel comfortable with them in. And I thought it was a very powerful moment of this is exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. We're not talking about taking away seats. We're talking about pulling up seats to the table, making it more inclusive, making it a industry that really helps individuals expand. And at the end of the day, that only helps everyone else when there are new ideas in the room, new discussions, new ideas come to the table and can really happen at that point that benefits us all.
Absolutely.
I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you also have to get back to work, but is there anything else that you would want to share about what you're working on, what you're hoping for in the next generation, how to get into the industry, anything along those lines? Any last topics that we may not have hit on yet?
One more thing that maybe we could add is help people to realize the importance of networking.
Mm-hmm.
So we already touched on basically building your network, mentors, and things like that. But I think networking is a skill and it doesn't come very easy. And I think some people will say, well, if I'm introverted, then I can't network. That's not the case. Because good news is that networking is a skill. If it's a skill, it can be learned, which is amazing and wonderful. And I think a lot of people might think networking is, oh, well, we're just taking time away from work and chit-chatting. But it's not, right? Like we don't have to have a conversation to get something out of somebody.
Correct.
I'm not having a conversation with you right now because I want this to be posted on LinkedIn to get more connections. I don't really need need that because I network outside of this already.
Right. Yep.
So I think sometimes it's important to connect with someone just because you want to be a friend.
Yes.
And I think in terms of networking, why is that important? Because metal industry, kind of as I mentioned earlier, it's very niche business. You don't want to burn bridges, you know. I say you, but really I'm thinking out loud, you know. I don't want to burn any bridges when I'm in this metal industry. It's a very small family, almost like a family-like environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think networking goes a long way. When people know you and they know your reputation and they can trust you, I think that speaks very loudly about who you are, what you do, and what you stand for. And I think, Jennifer, this is another reason that I respect you so much, is that you are a very good networking person. You're a very good networker. You have a lot of connections in this industry. So people know you and people respect you. So when you switch position and jobs, or when you have a new idea, such an example of this podcast, you got people supporting you, right?
Yes.
It's not easy to do.
Yes.
So
I definitely appreciate my network with this podcast. So thank you. It is a great way to go out on this because you can find Sandy Pierce, BASF, territory manager on LinkedIn. She's again, we talked about this, a really great individual to know. I have a very similar mindset. I like to network because I love connecting people, and I also love learning from people. What you do is not something that I ever thought would come across my radar, and I find it fascinating to learn about what you're doing. And you're constantly in the back of my mind of like, okay, when I'm at a conference or I'm talking to someone, is there somebody that like I could introduce Sandy to? Would that be a good conversation? Would that help out her business? And so networking can be mentorship. It can be friendship. It can be, business development opportunities. It can be all of those things. And I agree with you. I highly encourage people to get a little bit outside their comfort zone and network a little bit more than what they're used to.
and I mean, I think everybody defines success differently.
Mm-hmm.
So just because networking is not, say, somebody else's strong suit, I'm saying somebody else because I really do like networking, but I'm thinking of people that might be listening to this podcast who are like, oh man, I don't want to do any networking. Fine.
Yeah.
We have to define our own successes. What does success look like? I think, I don't know who asked me this one time. What are some skills that you think you need to be successful? And then I thought to myself, I can tell you the skill that I think I need to go to my next step. But you have to be the one identify what does success mean to you first. And then your skill set might be different than my skill set.
Yes.
If you really want to be a good analyst, you really want to be good at numbers, you really want to be good at the software that gets you there, then maybe learn the programming languages. That will be the next skill set, right? Those are the hard skills that you should have. And if you really want to be a good procurement and a company you're looking for really want a certificate in the procurement space, then that will be a good skill set that you want to go after.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think it's really understanding, taking a step back and understanding what is my definition, my personal definition of success. And it doesn't have to be the same for everybody, but know that metal industry is very diverse and there is procurement in the metal industry. We need analytical people all the time. We need people that do the finance, do the numbers. We need people that do accruals. We need people that do the forecasting, the inventory, not just the salespeople. So there's a lot of different areas that someone could get into. And it's exciting when we have the new voices and new eyes to see different things.
Thank you so much, Sandy. That's a really wonderful note to end on here. You can find Sandy Pierce on LinkedIn, BASF, and thank you so much for being our guest on Bets on the Future this week. I really, really appreciate it. It's great to call you a friend. It's really wonderful to have known you for these years, and I really encourage all the best for your continued success in the metals industry.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'll see you soon, right?
Yes.
In a couple of weeks.
Yes.